This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
And welcome to the latest edition of Tigers Talk with Chirco and Company. I am your host, Vito Chirco, and my sidekick, my partner in crime, always along for the ride, and he is as well today and this week, and that is the Doc, John Macaroon from Doc and Jock.
Vito, what's happening, brother? Have you been enjoying this year's version of the World Series?
I have so far. How about yourself?
Man, I really didn't think the Cubs were going to come back. I know the pitching matchup right now favors the Cubs. I mean, as we're recording this, Arrieta's going to go in Game 6. They're going to be trying their absolute best. But you knew going along that the Cubs were going to be a tough out. But I'm not so certain that the Indians want to play a Game 7, even though Kluber's pitched unbelievable. It's been a great series back and forth. A lot of people have been debating, and we'll talk a little bit later on in this podcast about whether it's the players or the managers that are making these things happen, because there's been a lot of debate about whether, Francona or Joe Maddon really have a lot of influence, or whether it's the players that are making this happen. And right now, Cleveland leads 3-2. Game 6 is tonight as we record this, and I'm looking forward to this podcast, talking about some Tigers news and notes. We got a special guest coming on rather quickly, and always good to check in with you, sir.
Well, thank you very much for saying that, John. And you know what? The Indians have done very well in terms of really pitching throughout the series. Bullpen, obviously, Andrew Miller, all these guys in their pen that can come in whenever, and any spot that Terry Francona chooses. And what a luxury that is to have that the Tigers don't possess.
Wait a minute, Vito. A pitcher can come in, and his role as a closer, and he could come in the 7th inning, and he could throw damn near 50 pitches and still walk away with the victory? As a Tigers fan, I don't think I've ever seen that. And I know it's the postseason. I know it's the strategy that you go balls to the wall when it's an elimination game. But you've seen it this whole postseason. The teams that are sitting at home are guys like Baltimore and, leaving your star pitcher, Britton, on the bench. Buck Showalter is taking a lot of heat, especially when you see now you got the managers in the World Series. They're using their closers in the 5th inning, 6th inning. Basically, it's the Andrew Miller show versus the Aroldis Chapman show. And whoever has the lead after 5th inning, look out, it's going to be tough to come back.
Well, now how about Aroldis Chapman being used by Joe Maddon, coming in the game in the 7th inning in Game 5, getting it done, throwing 40-plus pitches? That's a lot of energy that he had to exert, a guy that's used to pitching 1 inning.
Aroldis
and look
was
at how
100 miles an hour.
From the first pitch until the last, right?
Unbelievable.
To the last batter that he faced. Something else to see a pitcher do that.
All I can say, Vito, is I think collectively, everybody that's watching the World Series in Detroit is wishing and hoping that Brad Ausmus is learning something from what these managers are doing, because these are the two best managers in the game, and I'm of the opinion that the managers do have a lot to say, because a lot of people have criticized Joe Maddon regarding taking out Lester, especially when he was dealing, but he knew that his guy was fading, and he brought in his closer, and that was a wrap. Got you a World Series victory, something that the Tigers only got once in 2 appearances.
But it's only the first victory for the Cubs at home in the World Series since when? 1945, when they played the Tigers. The Tigers beat them in 7 games with Hank Greenberg coming back from World War II. What a performance by him and the Tigers. So the Cubs have some bad history with the Tigers, with that being said. And one other thing that I wanted to bring up regarding John Lester, who maybe didn't have enough gas in the tank there when he was brought out by Joe Maddon in Game 5 in this victory that forced a Game 6 and forcing the series to return to Cleveland. The Indians have the home field throughout the series because of the fact that the AL won the All-Star game and got home field through that. But anyways, John Lester, back to him. He was good. Hasn't been magnificent, in the World Series, but good enough. And they pulled him knowing that he had said himself, he admitted in the post-game interview with Ken Rosenthal or Tom Verducci of Fox that he didn't have enough left in the tank himself, and he's a big-time competitor, a big-time gamer. So if he's saying it, it was the right decision for Joe Maddon, even though a lot of people question why did Joe Maddon take him out in that place in a must-win game, a game, if they would have lost, would have forced the Cubs home without having a chance again to play in the World Series this season at least. So it was a game you have to win and you pull your ace. It was questionable. But in so many words, I think Lester, he had it coming. He knew he didn't have enough left in the tank, so it was a wise decision, and obviously it looks wise when it works out the way that it did. Aroldis Chapman, He pitched very well, and he got into a few jams, but showing that he could get out of those jams, work through them, and go from the 7th, coming in the game in the 7th, until the 9th to close out that game, that was magnificent right there, Doc.
Yes, sir. Now, just up next ahead, we got a special guest, a Major League Baseball scout working currently with the Colorado Rockies. Joe Housey is going to be with us next on this edition of Tigers Talk.
And as Doc had mentioned already, we have a guest and a professional baseball scout from the Colorado Rockies in Joe Housey. Joe, how's it going today?
Great, Vito.
Well, thank you very much for nice talking to you as well, and thank you very much for joining me on episode 64 of Tigers Talk. And Joe, first and foremost, for those looking to crack into the business of Major League Baseball scouting, how does it happen? How did you get into the business yourself?
Well, I spent 6 years as a player, signing in 1980, spending most of my last 3 seasons in Double-A, and really being a student of the game, I wanted to stay in it as long as I could. So when my playing career was coming near an end, I was looking for a way to stay in the game, the surest way for the longest amount of time. And then I went into being a pitching coach, and I did that for 5 seasons as well before starting scouting an area in 1990, the South Florida area, which expanded in the few years after that to eventually having an area from Ocala South down to Puerto Rico, where I would watch the high school, junior college, and college players.
So how did your experience as a player help you out in becoming a scout and in really knowing what to do and what to look for as a scout?
Well, when you've played, you spent a lot of time with guys that went on, played higher than you. You spent time in the dugout. And better players act certain ways when they're under pressure and in those situations. You know, I was always impressed by my better teammates that went on to make it, like a Billy Hatcher, Sean Dunston, Jamie Moyer, and the characteristics they had in the minor leagues would lead you to believe it wasn't surprising at all that those guys played a long time in the major leagues. You know, not so much knowing more of the physical attributes of the guys that go on and play a long time in the big leagues, but more the mental side as well, or more so.
So, Joe, what are some of the intricacies of scouting that people would not even come close to knowing about?
Well, not everybody sees everything the same exact thing, and when there's uniformity, you could, create a grading system, and several guys know about what you're talking about when you're talking about an average arm or an average runner or a guy in batting practice that shows average to better raw power. You'll all be pretty much on the same page. It comes with a lot of time and experience and gaining a feel for what you're looking for and what you're looking at.
And even with all your years now as a scout, how hard is it still for you to pinpoint whether or not a player has that all-star caliber ability?
Well, that's really difficult. A lot of guys come on later than others. Well, it basically comes down to ability and being able to make the most out of the ability you have. And that's a tough thing to scout. You can scout the ability, but you really don't know what's inside that person that drives them to get the extra effort or want to, make even more than what you have. Being an overachiever.
And are there differences from team to team in Major League Baseball in terms of what they scout, what they look for when they're scouting, such as you with the Rockies now? Does it differ from other ball clubs?
Not really. Everybody's looking at the skills first. The guys that could play stick out more so right off the bat than the other kids. And then you keep an eye on them to see their work habits, any indications of the mental toughness, how they handle adversity, how a pitcher might be in runners-on situations during the course of the game, getting over the hump. A lot has to do with just watching the game and seeing the players go about it. That tells you a lot about what's inside the player.
Now, Joe, we've had the opportunity to have a couple debates regarding sabermetrics versus the eye test. A lot of people are looking more and more towards these advanced sabermetrics when we're looking at, evaluating a player. What's your thought nowadays in terms of evaluating a player using these advanced numbers versus going out to the ballpark, sitting there, evaluating a player, and watching him live do his craft?
I think we know now that there's something to the numbers. They're pertinent. to an extent. But the best form of scouting is probably the combination of the both of them. You can't really scout without being at the game, and it doesn't even work on television all the time, although it's a great substitute. But being at the game, watching, them exhibit skills firsthand, there's something to be said about that. You get a feel for players, and like I said, not every scout, not every observer gets that. But maybe this guy, you would get the feel that this guy needs a change of scenery, for instance, will maybe underachieving here and possibly overachieving or playing more to his potential with a change of scenery. So as far as acquiring players, you really got to be at the game.
Now, Joe, I heard you did a scouting report on Michael Fulmer. So I've got to ask you, since this is Tigers Talk with Chirco and Company, about what you expected from Fulmer when you first saw him and did the scouting report. And what do you think he will become going forward as well as a big league starting arm?
Well, coming up, I think everybody was kind of surprised by how well he took the bull by the horn and actually went out there and executed and wasn't afraid to throw his good stuff in the zone, which we found out is very good and very tough to hit. And he's really a bulldog along with his attitude and fits into a middle to top of the rotation starter right from now. He was a great acquisition by the Tigers, and they're going to reap the benefits for years to come. Once you see what he's got and the way he goes about his business, pitching at the top of the rotation someday for the Tigers isn't too much to expect from him.
Now, how meticulous is putting together a scouting report? How much goes into it? How meticulous is it to produce such a report?
Well, different organizations do it differently. We have a pretty good one. It's not too short, not too long, and we elaborate on the skills or what he particularly does very well. With a pitcher, we'll break down the delivery and an arm action and go into his tools and how well we saw him. We refer to some statistics, but like I said, other organizations will refer to some more than some others. So there you go. You try to paint the picture of the player on paper, describing his mental attitude, how he goes about his business, work habits, whatever you should notice about him that could make you feel one way or the other about him. And every time you see him, you'll update that report, because every time you see him, you'll learn something else that you didn't know about the player, no matter how many times you've seen him before.
How many games do you travel to per season, approximately at least?
Approximately 120, 125.
Now, is that split between the minor league system of ball clubs and then the major leagues?
Yes.
Okay. And you know what? We got to talk about the World Series here to end this discussion today, Joe. And two really good ball clubs. They're both on the younger side for the most part, especially the Cubs, loaded with youth, and really have an embarrassment of riches, especially in their lineup. And obviously their rotation and pen aren't too shabby either. But anyways, you probably can tell who I like more than the other. But the question is for you now. Who do you like more than the other in terms of being able to pull out this year's Fall Classic?
Well, it's really satisfying to watch this great World Series because it's truly the two best teams playing. And it's tough. It's really tough to say one is a whole lot better than the other. But I do know the Cubs better, and it's not surprising that they're there and could be there a number of times in the future. Now,
Joe, you said currently at this point in time you were attending the Arizona Fall League back last week. What goes down? What goes on down there, and what did you get a chance to see this go around?
Well, I got to see a number of the players in the organization I had for another time. A number of the better prospects, got to see them again, and also some of the prospects, the better prospects from other organizations as well. So when those names are tossed about, I'll have an idea after having been in the Fall League and watched them out there.
Now, is there a guy in the big leagues right now that really, really stands out to you and that you can label right now as the best player in the game today?
No, I can't. There's several that you could debate that about. So I won't just say one is a whole lot better than the other. I think our third baseman is very good, and several scouts that have been around for a long time that told me he may very well be the best player in the game. So I can't argue with that.
Nolan Arenado is very solid.
And more than a few people have told me, that, a few scouts have told me that they thought he was the best player in the game today.
So many good young ball players right now, Doc and Joe. I mean, you have Manny Machado at third base as well. You've got Arenado. You've got Mike Trout, Bryce Harper, names for days. Javier Baez with the Cubs. Chris Bryant, Anthony Rizzo, who's not as young, but still loaded with young talent throughout Major League Baseball today. And, Joe, I know you've got so much work because of that in scouting for the Rockies. And thank you very much for all your time today. Best of luck to you with the Rockies as well and everything else that you do going forward in Major League Baseball.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
See you guys.
And back on episode 64 of Tigers Talk with Chirco and Company, we were joined there by Joe Housey, professional baseball scout with the Colorado Rockies, has had a ton of experiences, played the game himself in the minors back in the day, and Joe really lent some insight about what goes into a scouting report, how meticulous it is, and how it does differ at times from team to team, obviously, as well. And you asked him a very solid question about the analytics. How much does that weigh into what these guys put into their scouting reports about an individual player? It does weigh something, but not for all teams once again, too, Doc.
Yeah, it's going to be a stat. You know, these statisticians are going to build careers in terms of evaluating players. But again, I think he answered it perfectly. It's that you need to go out there and look and see what these guys are doing, too, in certain situations, because the numbers can tell you a lot. Definitely, they are a valuable tool, but they don't tell you exactly how to project a player going forward in the future. Like, for example, Cameron Maybin. Do you want to keep him now for the next couple of years? The stats will tell you what he's done in the past, but the question that you got to ask is, okay, going forward, do you pick up the option on Cameron Maybin? What are the numbers going to tell you? They can definitely lead up to and are a big part of the formula, but you have a lot more too that you can tell by the eye test as well in terms of what you see in different situations, what goes on in the clubhouse, how psychologically. There are a lot of things that go into evaluating a player, but definitely sabermetrics are part of the evaluation. That's no doubt about it. And more teams are becoming, because of the nature of the game in terms of the finances, if you're a ball club that doesn't have a lot of funds to spend, then you definitely have to be careful in terms of the players that you get, because you got to get more bang for your buck, especially if you're going to be in the middle of the payroll. Now, if you're a large market team, you have more advantages in that you can swing and miss at some players, whereas other ball clubs like the A's, like the Indians, like the Royals, like mid-level teams, you have a certain budget and that's fixed, and you have to find guys at that price to perform at a certain level, and that's where sabermetrics and advanced scouting will do a lot for you. So, Joe gave a lot of insight. That was very neat.
Joe mentioned also about Michael Fulmer, about the scouting report that he had produced about Fulmer. He said it right away he could tell that he would be a Bulldog. So they knew he would be a good starting pitcher. And then it comes to this for me, like, why do teams, now you end up getting Yoenis Cespedes, so I guess it becomes worth it to deal Michael Fulmer. But why do some of these other teams, when looking at a prospect like Michael Fulmer, why do they overlook him? How does he get to a ball club and not become a wanted top prospect from that ball club? And he really wasn't a top prospect with the Mets, pitching-wise, because of the fact that, they had so many good arms outside of him. And that's why they warranted that it was worth it to deal him to get Yoenis Cespedes. And obviously it worked out for the Metropolitans of New York, and they made the World Series, made that run because of Yoenis. But now the Tigers have Fulmer in the rotation. What a nice card to have, because you need him in a big game like in a World Series game. You need an arm like that, because he might be the next Corey Kluber, the Klubot that he's become in the World Series of the Indians. So you want to build from within with these young guys. Fulmer is one of those guys to build from within with. But I think the thing, too, to take into account is that people did not expect Fulmer to be this good this soon, though, at the same time. And he kind of briefly talked about that as well. And that's why it's hard to project, especially, I think, right away with these guys, how good they will be. And maybe easier at times to project what they can become. But even what they will become, that can be tough. And Mike Trout, I think, is one of the biggest examples, too. He wasn't drafted at the top of the first round when the Angels got him in the first round, but towards the end of that first round when he was drafted. That tells me, it doesn't just tell me. It's clear that a lot of teams passed up on Mike Trout. And there's a reason there, and that's why, once again, even as much scouting as you do on these players, it's hard to totally project how good they will be, and especially, my point is, right away. But even now, as I asked Joe about projecting Michael Fulmer, you think he'll be good, but once again, one little injury, arm injury, especially to a pitcher like Michael Fulmer, and he's done for good. Never nearly as good as he is right now.
And the thing you also have to realize is, how will he handle big-time money? Okay, because no matter who you are as a person, I don't care if you're the person that will tell everybody that, hey, money won't change me, I'm going to go about my routine. When you cash that, $100 million check and you sign that contract and you realize, my goodness, I'm getting paid every 2 weeks six figures. How's that going to handle? How are you going to handle that? Is that going to change your routine? Are you going to change as a person? Is your motivation still going to be there? And that's what is very important nowadays in terms of what these clubs have to evaluate. Is that, hey, we can't just go around throwing these big time contracts just to anybody. You got to make sure you do your research. You got to make sure the numbers are in order. You got to make sure that all your research in terms of the player's personality will be in line, because once that ink dries, the money's guaranteed, and you can't make mistakes.
And the scouts, I think, can pay for it. They lose their jobs over it. Like Joe, if he told the Tigers or the Rockies right now, as he's with the Rockies, to sign this one guy to a big contract that's a youngster like that coming up from within that they draft, you know what? If that player doesn't turn out to be a good player, it's on him. So the onus is on the scouts to get it right and get it right a lot more times than they get it wrong. You can get it wrong, but think about it. How many times can you really get it wrong? And you can't get it wrong too much. But once again, it's so hard to project these players and what they will become. That's why the jobs of these scouts, it is so tough. And the grind, he said he goes to 120 games about per year. That's a lot of games, not the length of a full major league season, which is 162, but still split between going to all these minor league clubs, then the major league team with the Rockies and other major league clubs to scout talent and see what we can go out and get as a team to upgrade our own team. It's hard to peg those guys, and then you still have to remember give up players to get those guys. So the resources, are they there for your ball club to get those guys that you think are good on other ball teams? That's also something that has to be taken into account. And a scout can't determine that, so the scout can only do so much. And it's just a hard job. And the onus, as I said, is on the scout to get it right more than they get it wrong, Doc.
Yep, let's take a quick timeout. Come back in the second half of the podcast, talk about a couple Tigers that are up for awards. I'm looking forward to see your take on who's in line to potentially take a Gold Glove. A couple Tigers are on the list.
Gold Gloves being up for Justin Verlander, Jose Iglesias, McCann. I think he should get one. We'll talk more about that after this quick commercial break. Hey guys, it's Vito Chirco from Top Cat Sales in downtown Royal Oak. Are you looking for team apparel for your high school, your club sports team, or your corporation? Well, if so, then look no further than Top Cat Sales, located on the east side of Main Street in downtown Royal Oak, between 11 and 12 Mile. Through founder and former University of Michigan quarterback John Wangler's leadership, Top Cat Sales has developed a tradition of selling and distributing custom Adidas team apparel with the very highest quality and the very best service. So get your organization, your school, or club team all in with Adidas today by going online to TopCatTeamSales.com. And once again, the website is TopCatTeamSales.com. And remember, you must follow Top Cat Sales on Twitter at Team Top Cat. And back here on Tigers Talk, episode 64 this week of the podcast. And Doc, always pleasant for me to be around you and talking baseball, talking the Tigers, and Gold Glove Awards. How about these guys being up for Gold Gloves? Justin Verlander, very notable to me because I've never really noticed him being a standout defensive performer at the pitcher position. So that's really strange to me. Now, a guy like Iglesias, McCann, who's a McCannon, as I mentioned, going into the break, I believe those guys deserve it, and especially McCann. McCann should win one, Doc.
You think so? He's in line this year to win one?
I think so.
Why?
Well, look at the stats. He throws out runners at a premium rate. One of the best, if not the best in all of baseball, in the American League, definitely. He's got that going for him. He could win a Gold Glove every single year with this proneness for throwing out runners consistently. It's about his bat, remember, that really, brings him back to a level that's not the best for a starting catcher. But anyways, to sum it up, definitely James McCann should get an award.
So, yeah, probably Verlander probably won't get it. What do you think about Iglesias?
I think he's too much flash, not enough substance at times. I think he's in contention for the award as a finalist because of the fact that you see him making all those Gold Glove caliber plays that are flashy, the highlight plays. Those attract the eye, right, that are watching highlights. There are so many highlights about him because of that, because he's so attractive to watch as a defensive guy, Iglesias. So I think he's up for the award more because of that than because of substance, which could prevent him, and I think will prevent him from winning a Gold Glove this year. So
the only Tiger that you see winning a Gold Glove is James McCann.
Well, and really quick, I wanted to bring up regarding that, it's also about these guys at second base. Kinsler's up for one as well, and I wanted to make sure we noted that. You got other guys who are good defensive fielders at second. So Kinsler, who didn't win one last year, by the way, should have won one. When you look at Fielding Bible, that's a big-time site for defensive metrics, for evaluating fielders and how they do. Kinsler had the top stat of all second basemen last year and should have won the Gold Glove. So this year, maybe as a reparation, they, get him that award this year. So I think Kinsler and McCann to sum it all up, Doc. How about you, of those four guys? Verlander, Kinsler, Iglesias, and McCann.
I agree with you 100%. I think that Ian Kinsler did a lot for the Tigers this year, and it'll be interesting to see whether his name comes up in trade talks because he's an asset, and he's an asset that's being paid quite a bit, and the Tigers are looking to shed payroll, and he's a guy that probably could get you something in return in terms of prospects and maybe above average player. Justin Verlander obviously has the right to stay, but I know that he's been tweeting out that he's already started his workout, his off-season program, and he's trying to get ready for the 2017 season. I just think that I just start to feel that his time has come because, you just can't pay everybody. When your payroll is that large, you're going to have to start shedding people, and it might be Maben, it might be JD Martinez, it might be Justin Verlander, might be Kinsler. It's just right now we're all playing the waiting game regarding who's going to be the first piece to be let go and who's going to be, not brought back. So it'll be interesting to see because, most people kind of want them to bring back K-Rod. He had a solid enough season, I think, to come back. Most people want Maben back. I think those two guys are important, but you might be thinking about just bringing back one. Of those two, which one do you think?
Maben's option is more expensive, so I think K-Rod gets brought because he's more on the cheap than Maben. Maben had a career year. K-Rod's done it, so he has more sustainability behind him, or the just career track record. So I think K-Rod gets brought back on the cheap. Maben does not. Now, they also could do this, which I think Tony Paul tweeted out about, and I brought it up on a previous edition of the podcast. They could pick up Maben's contract option for next year and then trade him. So flip him for some young arms, young players, prospects, and players of that sort. So maybe they will do that since they want to lessen the payroll. They could do that even by picking up his option and then by trading him. And then they could rebuild for the future, retool at least, as I've labeled it, as well for next year and beyond. So I think they could even do that with Maben, and I think K-Rod for sure gets his contract option brought up. But once again, talking about the Gold Glove Award finalists, and to revert back to that discussion really quick here, Doc.
I want to bring up something. I just was checking out thefreep.com, the place where you contribute great stuff too.
Yes, I do.
And it brings something home to me because I am a former East Point resident. I seen an article by Dave Mesri, special to the Free Press. 1908 Cubs artifact resides in East Point. Dan Zaja has been collecting baseball memorabilia since the days of JFK. And Dan is the owner of Melodies and Memories. And there's a significant baseball that he's got at his place.
Ooh, who's it from and how much is it worth?
It says here that at the location, there are baseballs signed individually by shortstop Joe Tinker, second baseman Johnny Evers, and first baseman Frank Chance.
I loved watching Joe Tinkerbell. It was one of my favorites to watch back then because I was alive back then, well before my time of 1993.
It said the baseball was signed in Detroit during the 1908 World Series.
Think about that, how much that's worth.
Oh, my goodness, yeah.
Good money. Donate that to the Detroit Sports Podcast Network so we can use that for some money. Or just hang it up in the office somewhere here on one of the ledges and showcase it to the masses. But that's really cool. Any artifact like that that's baseball, sports-related for me, man, I would go crazy about if I could attain it. And especially baseball-related. And the Cubs, if it was the Tigers, them playing each other then, and you having an artifact, and it's an East Point from your humble grounds, old stomping grounds. My dad, by the way, grew up in East Detroit when it was properly known as East Detroit, so I still got to give love to those people that knew it as East Detroit. Now, when you were there, Doc, wasn't it East Detroit at that time even?
It was East
and
Detroit
since
time,
it's become East Point. And interesting stuff right there, Doc. I wanted to revert, like I said, back to our discussion about the Gold Glove finalists. And Verlander is up for, along with Dallas Keuchel of the Houston Astros and R.A. Dickey, old man Dickey of the Toronto Blue Jays, who gets off the mound very quickly because he throws so slow. He has a knuckleball. And those knuckleballers, at times, especially Dickey in his defense or his sake, he's a guy that can get off the mound quickly. Since he does throw it not that hard, and with the knuckleball as well being one of those pitches that isn't a hard-throwing pitch, he can get off the mound quicker than the normal starting pitcher or relief pitcher. So I think Dickey might actually get that award. So I think he wins it for the pitchers. Now, for the catchers, like I said, McCann will get it, in my opinion. Salvador Perez and Carlos Perez of the Angels are two other good candidates, but I think McCann deserves it more than those two. Now, second base, Kinsler's up for it, along with Robinson Cano of the Mariners and Dustin Pedroia. Petey, the second baseman for the Boston Red Sox. I think Kinsler gets it. I think he'll redeem himself because I think the voters will feel bad for not voting him in as a Gold Glove winner at second base last year when he did deserve it, as I mentioned already in this week's edition of the pod. And then you move to shortstop. Iglesias is up for the award with Andrelton Simmons, the shortstop of the Angels, who grades out as the best defensive shortstop, one of the best defensive infielders, if not the best defensive infielder in all of baseball. Defensive metrics totally weigh in his favor. So I think Simmons will get it, and that's why Iglesias doesn't get it. And Lindor, Francisco Lindor, the star young shortstop, really phenom of the Indians, is up for the award as well at shortstop in the American League. And Lindor has had a great year hitting the baseball. And sometimes, if you remember this right too, Doc, they give guys that hit well the Gold Glove Award over guys that really are light-hitting infielders or outfielders, such as Jose Iglesias. And Lindor has hit all year long. Now, Simmons hasn't, but he has won it in the past in the NL with the Atlanta Braves, where he really stood out at shortstop. And remember last year, Doc, JD Martinez was up for it. Remember that? And this year, he kind of declined defensively. But to sum all this up, as we already had mentioned, I think 2 out of 4 get it. Not JV and not Iglesias, but mechanic catcher and Kinsler at second base. And you agreed with me about that.
Who do you think was the Tigers team MVP in 2016? Who was the single guy, whether you say was it Cameron Maybin, because when he was out, a lot of games were lost. When he came back in, he seemed to be the straw that stirred that drink quite a bit. Was it JV, who had a comeback year? Was it K-Rod? Was it Miggy? Was it JD Martinez? There was a lot of guys that contributed to the success of the club at the level that they had, but they just need a couple more guys to be more consistent offensively. Obviously, the bullpen needed to do a lot more. But if I were to say who was the 2016 Tigers MVP, who would you name it to?
Kinsler was the first half MVP. I got to say that JD Martinez was almost the second half MVP, even though he missed time. So I think JD deserves it. And also Verlander's right up there. I think Verlander actually gets it. JD second, Kinsler third, and Cabby not a distant fourth. And maybe it's probably number 5. So actually I just did my 1 through 5 off the top of my head. I think number 1 would be Verlander. Number 2, JD Martinez, let's say. Number 3, Kinsler. Number 4, Cabby. Number 5, Maybin. Top 5 right there.
So Justin Upton doesn't even make the top 5.
No, he shouldn't because of that horrible first half. He would be maybe top 10, maybe cracking the top 10. That's it. That's the extent of it for Jay Up after a poor, very poor first half. And hopefully, the key is now for him, if they don't trade him, he better have a much better first half. But we can discuss that ad nauseum going forward here. I wanted to talk about the World Series really quick to end this discussion today on the podcast. And about Corey Kluber. Won in Game 1, Game 4. And the Cubs had to win that one game at home just to force that Game 6 on the road in Cleveland now. Kluber's going Game 7. So if you get to a Game 7, you're in Cleveland, by the way, as well at Progressive Field, where the Indians are one of the best ball clubs in all of baseball this year.
See, at the time, at the time
Indians
of this recording,
are tough to pick against.
I'm going to say when this comes out on Wednesday, there will be no more baseball. Cleveland wraps it up Game 6. I think it's a party waiting to happen. Cleveland is the best team. Like I told you, like I told Jason, when I saw them play versus the Tigers, I wasn't just watching them whoop our ass each and every time they played us. I was watching them delicately, intricately regarding what they were doing with their bullpen, the management of the club. You saw the talent that they had, and you saw that they were still winning ball games even though some of their key players were going down with injury. And so when you see a combination like that, that's where the eye test comes in for me. That's where I'm a guy. I understand the numbers, and these last 2 years doing the podcast with you, I've learned more about defensive sabermetric numbers and learning more and more about the offensive numbers as well. But for me, I'm just a guy that looks at the game, and being a psychologist, I look at different situations. I look at the managers. I look at how a ball club handles adversity, and I like the Indians all the way around. I know the Cubs are America's team, national darling, national story, but the team that's playing the best brand of baseball right now is the Indians. And people will, and like I said earlier in the podcast, Terry Francona is managing his ass off in terms of making sure the right bullpen is being used, Andrew Miller being used eloquently, and at the same time, really maintaining a level of calm despite, you've got to remember, they came out of Cleveland with a split. Now you're facing 3 daunting games versus the Cubs, a city, an organization that's starved for baseball. You go there and you win 2 out of 3 games. That takes brass, that takes moxie, and I think that's being very underrated, is that a lot of people will say, hey, he's got a talented ball club. He's got Andrew Miller. But Terry Francona has to put these guys in that proper position. Joe Madden has to put his players in the proper position to make them succeed. And these 2 managers are a big part of why these 2 clubs are in the World Series, in my opinion. Yes, the players are great. They're a big part of it too. But Terry Francona and what he's done in terms of, keeping this ball club where it needs to be, even-keeled, professional, doing some things. I like Terry Francona as a manager, And that's why I believe when this podcast comes out, they will just be waking up in Cleveland after celebrating all night long. In my opinion, I'll see if I'm wrong or not.
How about Joe Madden trusting Aroldis Chapman to throw 40-plus pitches, to come in that early in the ballgame in Game 5, to get that W for the Cubs? That was impressive in itself, and that's a good decision now by Joe Madden. And look at the balls, right? The
win or go home, that's it.
Win or go home, you got to put in your best pitchers, and he did with Chapman there. And the Cubs fans around Wrigleyville that night, and you saw it on FS1 in the postgame show, man, those fans around there around the ballpark after Game 5 celebrated like they had just won the Fall Classic. And they didn't. But they won their first playoff game at home at Wrigley Field since 1945. That's an epically long drought of winning even just a World Series game at Wrigley Field, to verify what I meant there. So it's impressive. They just got it done there, but now they have a shot once again, even though the Indians in your defense have played better than the Cubs to this date. Now, the thing is, you got Arrieta going against Tomlin in Game 6. Tomlin's pitched very well, kind of out of nowhere. Arrieta is that supremely good ace, so legit ace. I trust Arrieta in this Game 6, even on the road, more than Tomlin, even though Tomlin has been no slouch and wasn't any slouch in the first half of this year, but his numbers in the second half were not good, and that's why I think Arrieta pulls it out in Game 6, and then you got a Game 7 where anything can fly, anything can happen, and you got the Kluber on the mound, but you know what, the Cubs can throw. John Lester might come in. He left it open, the possibility of him coming in from the bullpen in Game 7. If he comes in, hey, all bets are off too, and maybe he's really good, and that can prevail the Cubs to that Game 7 victory and their first Fall Classic victory since 1908, Doc.
And you have to give Major League Baseball credit. Huge ratings. Beat Sunday night's game.
I saw that. Ratings bonanza, and they beat Sunday Night Football.
Beat Sunday Night Football.
Yes.
And it's well-deserved, too.
Yep.
Cubs-Indians was the matchup. It's been a great World Series. I mean, the games haven't been super-duper competitive. I mean, there haven't been, like, classic 8th, 9th inning moments. There's been drama.
There was in Game 5. Come on. But I know overall-wise, I guess not as much.
Not in the later innings.
Yeah.
Nothing like late-inning heroics, nothing like that. No walk-offs, nothing like that. But you never know. There's still one game to go. Game 6, as we're recording this. I like Cleveland, like I said. I just think that right now something's going on in that city in terms of the sporting landscape with the Cavaliers. Now you have the Indians in the World Series, one game away. But would you imagine, though, that there was, a little bit of history kind of brought up in a paper that I read, that the last time there were 2 NFL ties in the National Football League was 1997. You know what happened in the 1997 Fall Classic?
So I'm hoping they do the same. Yeah, they lost to the Marlins.
Why do you want the Cubs to win so bad?
The Cubs, because of the fact that if the Indians win this year, well, it's 2 championships for the city of Cleveland. Don't like that to start off. But more importantly, to me at least, as a Tigers fan, it means the Tigers would have the longest drought of winning a World Series among AL Central ball clubs. After the Tigers made 4 straight division titles, because the Royals winning and the Indians, and back-to-back years you would have the Royals and the Indians and no Tigers winning. When it should have been the Tigers winning, at least 2013, then I wouldn't have cared about the Royals, the Indians winning this year, the Twins maybe winning next year. And what if that, for some odd reason, were to come to fruition? A team next year from the Central not named the Tigers winning again. God, please don't do that to me, because I will cry and cry until I can't stop crying no more. I mean, it will be bad. It will be epically bad for me, and I think many other Tigers fans who have to admit that this leaves a bitter taste in your mouth. Not only did the Royals winning leave a bitter taste in many fans' mouths, but if the Indians win, it would leave a hugely bitter taste in my mouth and in the mouth of many other Tigers fans who, like I said already, realize that the Tigers would have the longest drought, as much as this doesn't make sense, but would have the longest drought of not winning a World Series from AL Central ball clubs.
So, all right, here it is. Who do you got winning the World Series?
Cubs.
Cubs?
Absolutely. I told you this already, that the Indians have played better ball. Really, throughout the postseason, they've only had how many losses in the playoffs?
3. 2 versus the Cubs and 1.
Yeah, 3 overall. They've played better than the Cubbies. The Cubbies were on the brink against the Giants. The Dodgers played them very tough. And now the Indians have played them very tough. And this might be the team that can take out the Cubbies. If any team this year I think was going to do it, sad but true, I think it was going to be the Indians. So I could still see it happening. And I still give the Indians like a 45% chance, by the way, of winning. And they're up 3-2. So you got to like their odds, especially at home now. But the Cubbies, I give a better shot. I'll say 55-45 the chances. And in favor of the Cubs right now, Doc.
All right, before we get out of here, had a great opportunity to go out to Detroit Mercy to check out the exhibition matchup versus Wayne State. Detroit Mercy Titans basketball. That was a fun experience, man, going out there, seeing the work that you do. And something that I kind of discounted and didn't know was you're a man about town at that campus. Walking around, everyone's like, hey, Vito, hey, Vito, hey, Vito. And the best part was, and I tweeted it out and got a lot of laughs, was you introducing me as your co-host. This is my co-host, my co-host, which was great. I liked it. It was very nice. Everyone seemed to know you there, and you've left an indelible mark at that university. Good for you. The Detroit Mercy campus knows you pretty well, Vito, and it was great to cover a game with you. Even though the Titans didn't come out with the victory versus Wayne State, it was great to be on press row with you. It was great to see you hobnob with the celebrities, and thank you for acknowledging me and my slight role on your in your endeavors here at the podcast.
Because you only have a slight role. You haven't really done anything for me, obviously, as my co-host, as the founder, the owner of this podcast network, along with Adam Strozinski. But anyways, you deserve a lot of credit, and I probably made you feel bad, huh? I made you seem like you were playing second fiddle to me, that you were a third world citizen. I kind of made you seem like that at times, too.
It's good. I liked it because, what are you going to say? It was great. You know, people knew you from, like, all the media knew you.
You talked to Perry Farrell? Remember Perry Farrell was there?
It was great, and Coach answered your questions greatly. The podcast came out great, the post-game audio, and it was a great experience. I look forward to covering some more of the games with you this season.
Doc, thank you very much for everything this week. Thank you to Joe Housey, professional baseball scout with the Colorado Rockies. Great insights from him, and we look forward to very more insights given by you and I and other guests in the future and next week as well.
And so I forget, what did we do last year when the season ended? We did a podcast basically every other week or so. What did we kind of talk about in the offseason? Because I forget. What did we talk?
You forget a lot, I guess. Then,
yeah,
huh? Well, offseason news and notes about the Tigers, trade rumors, that kind of stuff, free agent moves, trades.
Fall leagues.
Not really.
No, we didn't talk about fall
I don't know
leagues.
what you're talking about. You talked about it with Joe Housey. Maybe you're thinking of that because of your short-term memory reverting to the discussion with Joe Housey. But anyways, we have stuff to discuss, and we did it actually almost every single week in the offseason even.
Nice.
And we had like different guests on, like Curtis Blackwell to talk Michigan State football, and they were going into that Final Four game against Alabama. So we're going to have some different kind of guests to kind of venture out there a little bit because obviously we can't talk Tigers for 40, 45 minutes every single week now. We probably can do all of baseball for 40, 45 minutes. So we're going to aim for that. And that's the goal going forward right now during the offseason here.
Yeah, baseball guests, probably.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm going to probably check out this store and see what they have. Maybe this guy will come in and share some stories about collection because he seems like he's a big collector. Maybe go down to East Point and check out this guy's place.
Back to your old stomping grounds at that too, Doc. You would enjoy that, and I think I even would if you would allow me to come along with you for the ride.
Maybe we'll go check it out. Very good stuff, sir. All right, so I got the Indians, you got the Cubs.
I do.
Let's see how it shakes out going forward. But either way, one fan base is going to be devastated. One fan base is going to be super duper excited. You know that, Vito.
Absolutely, Doc. And Doc, thank you very much. Once again, thank you to Joe Housey and to everybody who is tuning in to this very edition of the podcast. We'll be back next week.
Vito, you got one mission.
Tell me.
Al Avila. You got 20 weeks.
Wow, you're giving me that much time. That's a lot of time.
Should you choose to accept this mission, you will have an opportunity to earn significant buku bucks. Get the biggest guest that we're probably going to have talking baseball in this town. Find you, general manager, Al Avila.
I do accept the mission. Goodbye.
Here we go.